You know, sometimes it's nice to just shut up and let the game have a few words. Because if you're anything like me, that's a sweet, sweet song. Are you anything like me? I think I'm getting weirder doing this job. I think I need to stop before I a board game. Alright, so Secrets is a small box game for a big table of 4 to 8 players who want to have big fun, accusing one another and laughing at one another's misfortune and trying to figure out what's going on. It imagines the Cold War, but less Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy as idiot, bastard, cretin, and cretin again. When the game starts, you might be assigned to the KGB team, the CIA team, or you might be a hippie working alone. But here's the twist, when the game begins, only you know what team you are on because all these tokens are dealt out face down. You look at your own token and, intriguingly, you look at the token of the player to your right. That's the level playing field when you start. Although in play, it's more like a level ball pit of bullshit. Because there's one person around the table, just one, who knows for sure what team you're on and what you want. And you have no idea what team they're on, or if they're on a team, which is definitely a spy movie that I would watch.
Comrade, listen to me and you listen well. There's a politician who'd like to meet with our organization. Always happy to make a new friend. Where should I meet them? That's on a need-to-know basis? Yeah, but I need to know. Well, that remains to be seen. What? Listen here. Have you got 5p for a cup of tea? Who are you? Indeed. Who am I? Oi! Did you take my cigarettes?
The game itself is pretty simple. Starting with the player who was most recently abducted by the CIA or the KGB, players take turns drawing 2 cards off the top of the deck, revealing them, and then sliding these lovely little arrow markers to the corresponding characters so everyone can remember who they are. What you then do is you secretly pick one of these characters to discard and have another that you're going to offer to a player around the table. Now, what's important is the number here. If the player accepts this sexy professional, that sexy professional goes in front of the player and offers that many sexy points to that player's team. So if you're KGB and you get the scientist in front of you because you accept it, then that's 5 points to your KGB team. Awesome. But there's plenty of talking allowed, so I can go, hey, look, man, I've looked at your token, you're KGB, and I'm KGB, so accept that because it's a scientist. And you go, all right, so you accept it. But it was the less sexy detective. And now that team has -2 points. And what team am I on? Lying to you like that. There's other things to consider in this exchange, though. The most important thing, maybe, is that if the player you offer the card to says, no, I don't want that card, then it goes back to the player who offered it, who gets it instead. So if you reject this card, then I get the less sexy detective. The other thing to consider is whoever gets this detective gets their special power, because all of the 8 professionals in Secrets have powers. So if you do get stuck with less sexy detective, then you get to look at 1 token around the table. And that's your sort of like consolation prize. Other professionals in this game might include the assassin, who gets to shoot out a negative victory point bullet card at someone when you accept it. The scientist gets you 5 points, but if you ever have a second scientist in front of you, you know too much and all the characters in front of you are killed. The journalist is worth 3 hot points, but if you get the journalist, you have to show everyone around the table your token without looking at it yourself. Why is that relevant? Because, my sweet bouncing baby agent, you might not know who you are. You see, the other 4 roles in Secrets relate to looking at the token in the middle of the table and then swapping it for yours, or someone swapping 2 players' tokens, or the diplomat who reveals what's in the middle and then makes all the other players close their eyes and swaps it with the player on their left or the player on their right. And once the game begins, you're not allowed to look at your token. And you're doing all of this to try and get people with, you know, crap characters off your team, or to get onto the winning team, or to inflict or gain or avoid the hippie token. Because remember I said at the end of the game, the team with the most points wins? It's totally true. I'm no liar. But if the player with the hippie token has the lowest points, they win and everyone else loses. The game ends when someone has 4 cards in front of them, or 5, depending on player counts, which means secrets can also be very, very quick if your team plays their cards right and manages to get enough cards in front of someone else. But one rule I haven't taught you about yet, and like all the rules in secrets, it's easy to teach and fun to learn about. The UN exists, and if one player ever has less cards in front of them than anyone else, they can get the UN. The UN can intervene, and when a player offers 2 cards to another player, while that player is deciding, do I want to accept this card, the person with the UN token can go, the UN's intervening! The UN has intervened and now that card is mine. You have to do that sight unseen, which means that occasionally the UN will give funding for a hippie to hire an assassin. But that's okay, they have a lot on their plate, you know. So that's Secrets. What else to tell you? Well, it comes in this gorgeous tiny box, which is as small as they could possibly make it. Love that. It's beautifully illustrated with women front and center looking great. Love that. And these chips are probably my favorite board game component ever. They're heavy, they're lovely, the ink in them is wonderful. Love that. What am I missing? Oh yeah. It's fun. It's lots and lots of fun. Everyone I've played it with has deeply enjoyed it, and I take it back, you know? This game is a bit like the movie Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, in that you might not totally know what's going on, but it won't matter. You're still having a lovely time. So let's start with some board game science. Having secret roles is fun, having secrets that only you know is fun, and trying to deduce what's really going on is fun. So now let's compare secrets to some other games that do similar things. This swapping tokens mechanic is something borrowed from the excellent Masquerade. We liked Masquerade because it taught us that there's some actual magic that happens on your table when you start swapping face-down identities, because you make assumptions. It's human nature, we can't help it. You go, this is probably definitely CIA, and there's only 2 CIA chips around the table, which means that must be CIA. So when the game ends and it turns out you were completely wrong, it's equal parts delightful and humbling and funny. Plus the story it tells is great. You might be really some acid burnout of a hippie who thought he was working for the CIA his whole life.
Hello! Is that White Rabbit? This is Laughing Eagle. The gent you've got me tailing entered the building at about 1400 hours. But don't you worry, I'll keep my eyes peeled along with certain other things.
What's even sillier is in that game, because you're the hippie and you told everyone you were the CIA, you got terrible cards, you thought you doomed your team, but because you're the hippie, actually, you won. But there's a big difference between this and Masquerade, because in Masquerade, a game with closed information where everyone's out for themselves, 2 cards get swapped and all players can do is sort of go, ha ha ha. But in Secrets, players are sharing information and lies, and there are teams, and so you kind of get these shared mental maps where you go, you're definitely KGB, this is definitely CIA. And what that means is that when 2 tokens get swapped, if you're like, okay, he's KGB, which means he's not on my team, which means that low score is good for me, and that's good because they're probably not the hippie. And then when tokens get swapped, everyone can go, ah, together, as your mental maps are all scribbled over in crayon, and now you don't know what to believe, which is more fun. Meanwhile, the secret team stuff might remind you of Werewolf or The Resistance, and it's kind of similar to that, but the big difference is that while those are games where you have to lie and you have to be competitive, Secrets is more interested in creating a kind of mad ecosystem of entertainment where you can be the treacherous little frog who spits poison into everyone's ear, or you can be the proud lion who stalks around trying to solve the puzzle, or any other number of weird animals that don't exist. And the game is in sort of Putting this box of secrets on the table, then adding your friends and seeing what happens, and then just trying to make the best of this situation by offering savvy cards and making savvy plays and telling savvy half-truths. My point is that Secrets is a more welcoming and accepting box than the Resistance or Werewolf. It's also less electrically exciting, but I have any number of people who I can't play the Resistance and Werewolf with, and that's just not true with Secrets. Even if a player isn't competitive and just wants to cause trouble, you can dump them off your team. But we can only get so far comparing Secrets to other hidden role games we've reviewed because it's absolutely its own beast. This mechanic of drawing 2 cards and then deciding which to give away and seeing what happens next, that's new. And it results in lots and lots of interesting things because it's not, don't think of it like there are 8 characters in Secrets you might draw. There are dozens of different combinations of characters you might draw, you see, and how they play out is really interesting. There's a real touch of theatre to playing Secrets. For example, let's say you've got a scientist, right? That high value card where if you get a second, all your score is destroyed. You have one scientist and you know this guy's on your team. So you want to offer them a scientist, but if that player rejects it because they don't trust you, that's your score destroyed. What if you have a journalist and you want to give those 3 juicy, kissy points to your friend, but then you're thinking, is it worth it? Because then they'll have to reveal their token and our team will lose something we know. What if you give that player the journalist and they accept, and then they flash a token and they're not on the team you thought they were? This game is full of surprises. It's full of, another word beginning with S. What is it? Secrets. It's full of stuff I don't want to spoil. In other words beginning with S. It's interesting. That word doesn't begin with S. So, Shut Up and Sit Down recommends Secrets. It's very quick to teach and then it's nothing but laughs and decisions and deductions from start to finish, and I've played it with dozens of people and they've all had a smile on their face for the whole game, and it's good and you can buy it if you like having a good time with your buddies. But, so I will recommend that you buy this game and I will play it anytime someone wants and I'll enjoy myself. After this review, I'll put it in my collection. But I will never love it. You see, I have a criticism of it, which is that it's just a bit fluffy, which isn't a word we've used on Shut Up and Sit Down before, I don't think. So let me talk about what it means. It is possible to make very clever plays in Secrets, to give just the right card to just the right person, and then have them reject it, and then you get it, but that's the card you wanted anyway. You gave it to yourself now, and look, I've got 5 cards and I've ended the game. But did I just mean that I win? Well, maybe not. You see, the decisions you make in Secrets, I feel, don't always impact or change the direction of the absolute maelstrom of misinformation and lies that are going around the table, of tokens that are being moved around and shifting people onto the wrong team at the last second, and it doesn't change what cards you actually draw, and it's possible to get the cards you need or not. I don't feel that you could get particularly good at Secrets. I don't feel that you could form a really great team and do really well like you do in the Resistance, where you just want to hug afterwards because you worked so well together. And that's sometimes okay. Games like Munchkins and Flux, which are absolute parades of bull, have sold hundreds of thousands of copies. Sometimes it's enough to feel like you're impacting a system when you're not really. That's clearly the case with Secrets. It's still deeply enjoyable. But for me to truly care about the decisions I make in the game, for me to be satisfied, and for me to walk away from a table going, oh, I did that wrong, or oh, that was so clever, for me to put the amount of brain power into this game that this game wants me to, I have to know that my decisions will make a difference. And that isn't always the case in Secrets. It feels that it is. It's kind of an illusion. And it's a wonderful, entertaining illusion, and I will never turn a game of this down. But while I would be surprised if someone told me they didn't like Secrets, I would be surprised if you told me it was your favourite game ever. And my question to you would be, don't you think it lacks substance? Ooh, we're done here. Thanks for tuning, everybody. The last thing I'll say is that Secrets is a collaboration between famed designers Bruno Faiduti and Eric Lang, and this isn't their first game together. Last year I reviewed HMS Dolores, another game about being an awful, awful, awful person, but one that's completely different from this, plays to a much lower player count, involves weaponized rock, paper, scissors, and getting beautiful boxes of guns and porcelain, and just click on our review. It's a really good game. I'd happily recommend it. All right, we're done here, which means I can finally check my token and tell you what I've always known, which is you've been watching Shut Up and Sit. Well, that raises a lot more questions than it answers. Thanks for watching. No pun included, everybody. If for more great board game content, why not check out our Magic Maze review or a Yokohama review, stuff that Shut Up and Sit Down hasn't even covered yet. It's honestly really funny. It's just, oh, I can never go home again.